On this episode of Locked On Lightning, finally, without further ado, we start the summer of 2004. We take a look back on the phenomenal run that was the road to the Lightning picking up their first Stanley Cup title. And on today's episode, we start things off with Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Quarterfinals.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On this episode, we are going back in time, 20 years back in time to where we talk about one of the greatest runs in Lightning hockey history. Obviously, that is the year the Lightning picked up their first Stanley Cup title, and we're doing a full run, every single game played up until Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. But today, we started off with Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Quarterfinal series against the New York Islanders. We talk about just the nostalgia factor of it all, looking back, rewatching all the games, as well as some of the highlights from these games. You know, we'll be breaking it down as if these games are happening yet last night or whatever, you know, if we're reliving it in real time and all that. So super excited to get to it. But before we grab any of that, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead, subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified, and you could tune in along on our social media pages at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as Locked_Lightning on Instagram, because on our social media pages, we'll be posting the best play or the play of the game from each game as we review it. So make sure to check in on that. So starting off real quick, I am going to really be approaching these recaps as if I'm watching it for the first time, which cards on the table I am. I was 12 years old at the time, and being in New York, since a lot of these games were broadcasted locally in Tampa Bay, I was not able to watch them. I was able to watch some of the games during the Stanley Cup Final, if my parents permitted me at the time. And that's it. So, you know, that's the approach we'll be having. And I hope you could join along in the fun of watching some of these games for the first time. So starting off at the bat, just looking at, you know, the build up to this. So this is a playoff run in which the Lightning previously failed, getting knocked out in the previous year prematurely. And during the regular season, this is back when the divisions were a little bit different. The Lightning played in what was called the Southeast Division. They ended up winning their division with 106 points. They actually finished with the second most points in the entire league, only behind the Detroit Red Wings, who we all know at the time were just an incredible core out there in Detroit. They were out in the Western Conference at that time. You look at the Eastern Conference, who was coming out, those teams looks a little different than what we're normally used to in today's playoff picture, where for the most part, you're going to get the teams that are good on a yearly basis. So coming out of the East, it was the Lightning as the number one seed, Boston, Philly, Toronto, Ottawa, Jersey, Montreal, and then the Islanders, who finished the season with 91 points, the eighth seed coming out of the Eastern Conference, so they get paired up with the Lightning. The Lightning at this time are being led by some of the greatest players in their franchise history. Vinny Lecavalier, captain at the time, was Dave Andreychuk. We're all familiar with him. All you got to do is turn on a Lightning game at any time. Nikolai Khabibulin, if you're watching these games for the first time, you're going to hear that name quite a bit. He was the goaltender for the Lightning at the time. Came into this playoff series struggling a little bit, but boy, he had quite possibly one of the greatest runs of all time, at least in the last 20 years, by a goaltender in playoff history, and I'm really excited to see that unfold. Freddie Modine, Lightning legend, we all know about him. He made his presence very well known in this first game and throughout the playoff run. Andre Waugh, we all know about him. Brad Richards, another Lightning legend. Marty St. Louis. I mean, really, when you think about Lightning history, the Mount Rushmore of Tampa Bay Lightning history, as of now, I mean, that could change possibly in the future, depending on, what happens with Point and Coach and Hedman, Stamkos, and also it's all subjective. Vasilevsky in this current era of Lightning players. I think right now, though, Marty St. Louis is definitely at the top. And just going back to the regular season, Marty St. Louis led the team in points and goals scored. He had 38 goals along with 94 points to go. Corey Stillman was second on the team with 80 points. And then you had Richards at 79, Lecavalier at 66. Lecavier's 23 at this point, which is wild to think about how young he really is at this point. And so is Marty St. Louis. He's 28. That's really the cool part about all of this, I think, when we're going to be talking about these games, is that none of these guys play in the league anymore. I mean, Marty St. Louis is the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens, so put that in perspective. The whole other part that I love about this, when we're going to be going over these games, and I encourage everybody, especially the people that maybe are around their late 20s to early 30s, especially around my age, I'm 32 years old, pause the game, and they're all available on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch and follow along. And if you want, we'll be posting I'll be posting the links on my Twitter account every single day, every single time we release an episode. The links to that corresponding game will be on Twitter, so make sure to follow along for that. But I encourage everybody, even those who are a little bit closer in age to me, to really, for the nostalgia part, just at times pause the game, look at some of the sponsors, look at some of the equipment that the players are playing. I mean, I completely forgot up until today that Nike had their own brand of hockey equipment, which is insane to think about. Which, if you're listening to this and this is the first time you ever hearing about this, Nike had some of the coolest looking hockey equipment, especially skates back in the day. So take a look at those. Some of the sponsors that are on the boards, those were pretty cool to see. But really, in this game, getting into the crux of it, this was really a game in which like I said, I'm watching a lot of these games for the first time. And this was a game in which I really thought at the jump, the Lightning really had this game in the bag. And of course they did. They ended up winning the game 3-0. Nikolai Khabibulin, who, like I said, you're going to be hearing his name quite a bit throughout this playoff run, because really he was, some other people might say it was Brad Richards, but the Lightning definitely don't win the Stanley Cup without Nikolai Khabibulin going out there and doing his thing and really just at times shutting the door down. His nickname was the Bulin Wall back in the day, so that shows you. But the Lightning start out really fast from the jump, and it was really a game where, from really the initial puck drop, I really thought that this game was going to be 5-0 at the end of the first period. But the Islanders, even though they looked pretty outmatched from the opening puck drop. I thought what they really did a good job of, at least in the first period. And then, of course, things kind of started to unravel as the game went on, as, it usually does sometimes with games. The Islanders were really good with just doing as much as they can to just withstand the attack. And really, as we all know in the game of hockey, that's really all you could really do is just do your best to weather the storm and then hopefully come out with it with maybe a 1-goal deficit if you're lucky. But in this case, they really did a good job and really went into the first intermission a scoreless game. And I guess that, if you're an Islander fan at the time watching this game, that's all you could really ask for. And then as the game went on, the thing that really kind of annoyed me, and it seems, I don't know if this was just how the style of officiating was back then, or I don't know, as we'll see what will transpire throughout the series, but there was a ton of penalties called in this game. There was 12 penalties called total. The Lightning were 1 for 7 on the power play, where the Islanders failed to capitalize on any 5 of them. And I think that's really where the Islanders kind of lost this game. I mean, anytime we talk about it here with the present Lightning, how anytime you get maybe 3 power plays, you should really capitalize on one of those. I think really the minimum requirement for a team in order to at least stay in a game when they're getting power play opportunities is to hit that 33% mark. And if you could do that, that means you're doing just enough to kind of stay in the game, unless you're getting completely blown out of your own barn, which can happen, of course. Which I really thought could have been the case early on in this game, as the Lightning really, even though they only got off 5 shots in that first period, like I said, the Islanders and Rick DiPietro really did just enough to stay in the game in order to keep the game where they wanted it to be. So then both teams go into the first intermission. It looks like the Lightning still have a little bit of an edge. The ice has kind of evened out at this point, and the Islanders completely come out and just really with their guns ready. And I think when you look at the shots on goal counter, you would be very surprised that the Lightning scored twice in that period. And that was really something that surprised me. The Islanders shot the Lightning in the second period 15-5, and the Lightning scored 2 goals, which is pretty impressive to say. Both goals in that period were scored by Andre Roy and Freddie Modine. Both were unassisted, which is pretty cool to see. And really they come 6 minutes apart, which really I even though the Lightning did win this game 3-0, and you still had a whole other period to play, it seemed as though, even though that the Islanders didn't seem like they were completely outmatched, once Modine scores that goal, it kind of seems, at least, well, his first goal of the game, because he ends up scoring another in the third on the power play to kind of just hit the final nail in the coffin. Once he scores that goal at 11:06 in the second and make it 2-0, it really just, that's where the ice completely shifted. And I'm not saying the Lightning mailed it in from then on there, but you definitely saw the intensity level get scaled back just a little bit. But knowing everything we know about John Tortorella, most likely, even though they go into that second intermission up 2-0, I'm sure he had a lot to say about being outshot 15-5 in that second period. But you know what? The Lightning come out. They play even style hockey. They do what they got to do. It wasn't, and it wasn't an overly physical game. There was some pushing and shoving there at the end of the game, mostly by the Islanders trying to instigate stuff. But it was mostly an even keel game. Obviously, once we get to the Stanley Cup final, you'll see when they play Calgary, that's just a crazy series. So you can't really compare anything to that. But I would figure a team like the Islanders, who really are, they're playing the best team in the East. You would kind of figure that they would come out, try to play as physical as possible, wear down the Lightning. But that just wasn't the case, and maybe try and get some momentum in their favor, and that really wasn't the case in this one. But Lightning win this one 3-0. The nostalgia is off the rails with the equipment, like I said, with the sponsorships, with the atmosphere in Tampa Bay. It's not even Amalie, it's St. Pete's Forum. So a lot of cool things to observe as you're watching games. So let me know in the comments below. We'll be doing it basically this style going forward, which I think is a pretty good way to do it. So let me know what was your favorite part of the game. What were some of the things that stuck out to you from game one of this Eastern Conference quarterfinal matchup between the Lightning and the Islanders, as the Lightning pick up their first one of the series, looking to end things quickly as they are en route. They don't know yet, but we do. En route to their first Stanley Cup title. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to continue talking about this game. One of the highlights of this game was just the play of Nikolai Khabibulin. We're going to break it all down and really just see how he could continue his play during this playoff run. But before we jump into that topic, we're going to talk about one of today's sponsors, and that is our friends over at Game Time. Now, if you haven't heard about Game Time, listen up. It is the one-stop shop platform for all tickets for all occasions, whether it be concerts, sporting events, theater, musicals, whatever you have in mind that sells tickets. Game Time is there not only to supply you with those tickets, but to give you the best deal possible with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You could pick out any specific games or matchups that you'd love to attend, or you could just simply browse through the app and see some of the high-profile events. They have deals for any type of occasion. One of my favorite things is their flash deals, where really you have a limited amount of time to pick up great deals, and that's how you save. That's what I love about this app. You could save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever, with their flash deals. I love their seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. You can find some more of my work over at boltsbythebay.com. Wrote an article today, a short write-up of just the J.J. Moser deal, how that affects the Lightning, where do we expect him to play on this team, how do we expect him to play on this team, all of that good stuff, and continue just to go looking at that site. We got a lot of content planned for the summer, so you definitely don't want to miss out on that. But like I said, content in general, we're going to be doing this basically the rest of the summer. It's going to be it's going to be super fun, and I can't wait because, like I said, I've seen some of these games. I was only 12 at the time. A lot of these games ran late for me. Obviously, the Lightning, especially when they got to the final at that age, my parents aren't going to let me stay up that late, especially when they were out in Calgary. So, oh well. But you know what? It's going to be a great experience, I hope, for all of you as well. I'm sure there's some of you that either have never watched these games or just don't remember some of the highlights from these games, which is why it's important. Go ahead and follow our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram, because we'll be posting, like I said, the top play, in our opinion. I mean, you could tell us as well, our top play from each game as we review it. So go ahead and do that. Our top play, and you'll be able to get to see the highlight. It's 40 minutes into the game. It's the save. Brian Boyle makes a phenomenal save in front. Sorry, not Brian Boyle, Dan Boyle. And he just, it was really just, I couldn't believe that he was able to just, it's one of those playoff moments where you just are in the right place at the right time. So, as we see in the playoffs all the time with hockey, sometimes the puck just finds you. He makes a great body save. Khabibulin's out of position on a rebound, and he's just able, especially with all the traffic around him, he's just able to really just get his body in front. Boyle ends up falling and hitting his head on the ice, but just somehow is able to kind of stay there and kind of just cut off that part of the net. So you'll be seeing that on our social media pages, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. But we can't post it on YouTube, unfortunately, because of copyright stuff. But speaking of Nikolai Khabibulin, growing up, and especially when we hear people talk about Lightning history, the name that always comes up when you talk about some of the good players, obviously you know the names, most of them. You know the LeCaviers, the St. Louis, the Brad Richards, the Andrew Chucks, a little bit more recently, Ben Bishop. We know about him, obviously. Pavel Kubina, Ruslan Fedotenko. But Nikolai Khabibulin, I think, is a player that he's talked about in Lightning history. I'm not saying he doesn't get his due, but when people say he played great during this playoff run for the Lightning, I feel like it's almost an understatement, because I don't feel like people really understand how truly great he was at times throughout this run. I remember watching all the Stanley Cup games during the pandemic when we were kind of doing our rewatch then, and just kind of just being mesmerized by how just clutch he was at times. And it kind of, it's one of those things where it's very rare with him that I've seen, especially in this game, where he is out of position. He doesn't overreach on anything. He's the kind of goaltender thus far that I've seen in this game where just by his style, you could see why he was so good for the Lightning. How the best way to describe it is just he just lets the puck come to him and he will react accordingly. And in this game, he faced flurries here and there, especially in the second period. 15 shots, ended up saving 30. Really went out there and he made great saves, but it wasn't highlight worthy saves. You know, when I say highlight worthy saves, I think of Vasilevsky behind the back. I think of 1 out of every 5 Dominic Hasek saves like that. It was pretty impressive to see with Khabi how good he was going from post to post. His lateral movement, I thought, was just really impressive, and he, you know, it was shocking to kind of hear almost when the announcers were saying how he was struggling leading up to this game. And it looked like he got back to his old self, and if you would have not given me any context about what his season was before that, I probably would have assumed that he was a Vezina Trophy goaltender, or at least close to one, because he was just, incredible throughout that entire run. And that's also part of the whole stage of the Stanley Cup playoffs is it really brings out the best in players that sometimes you don't really expect it. That season, he played 55 games. His record was 28, 19, and 7. His save percentage was 910, and his goals against average was 2.33. He had 3 shutouts that year. So, and he finished 7th in the Vezina. So, yeah, I mean, and if you look back at that Vezina Trophy voting, it was really. I'm sure and I'm pulling it up right now. So if you want to follow along, no surprise here. Marty Brodeur wins. Marty Turco, the great goaltender from Dallas, came in second. Ed Belfour, we all know him. If you're a fan of 90s hockey, early 2000s hockey, you know who he is. Patrick Waugh, that's a name probably sounds familiar to some of you. Finishing 4th. It's really going to be enjoyable to see how Khabib evolves throughout this playoff run. And when I saw him play in this game, I saw a guy that was just super comfortable from the onset. I will say one thing. Even though he did face 30 shots, I didn't feel like he was really challenged. I felt like, for the most part, the Islanders were just, to a certain extent, just throwing pucks on net and just hoping for a good rebound and a secondary chance. And there was a couple of those instances. But from an Islander standpoint, I think really what they needed to do more was have more traffic in front. And I would imagine as the series goes on, that is going to be a point of focus. So let me know in the comments below what you thought about Nikolai Khabibulin's performance in Game 1, 30-save shutout to give the Lightning a 1-0 lead in the Eastern Conference Quarterfinals against the New York Islanders. So coming up in a little bit to wrap things up, we are going to talk about some predictions or expectations for Game 2, what to expect in that matchup as the Islanders try to get back on track. You know, you get shut out in Game 1, and you're playing against the best team in the East. It's a team that you can't really afford to fall behind in a playoff series, as we all know in today's playoffs. You saw how the Lightning fared against the Florida Panthers this year. Can't allow yourself to fall behind a playoff series, because a 2-0, being down 2-0 in a playoff series, you might as well just, it almost feels like you're about to get swept. So let me know in the comments below how you felt about Khabib, and we'll talk about the expectations in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about our last sponsor on today's show, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience is what is the winning formula to winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep a ride or die alive with eBay Motors at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So we're wrapping things up with our first watch through of Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Quarterfinals. Like I said, we'll be doing an episode for every single game that the Lightning play in throughout this playoff run. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. So go ahead, follow us on wherever our podcasts are distributed in audio form. You could also follow us on our YouTube page, comment below each video. Just give us your thoughts. And you could act as if you've never seen this game before if you wish. Entirely up to you. Or if you choose to make observations, which we will be doing, kind of how the parallels are between that '04 run and, any of the other Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup runs, as well as, even just what the present day Lightning could take from the '04 run. So let me know in the comments section below. So what to expect from game 2? Obviously, as I stated before, not a good start to the series for the New York Islanders. You definitely want to just try to come out in game 2, not only just trying to slow down the Lightning, but to get on the board. Don't try and overcomplicate things. Just go out there and just play your game. Play the game that got you into the playoffs throughout the regular season. And what that means for the Lightning is that they're going to come out and have to manage the game. We see it with today's Lightning team all the time. If you don't come out in those first 5-10 minutes, like we saw what the '04 Lightning did in game 1, if you don't come out and take control of that, especially on home ice, which is very important, as we all know, if you don't do that, it could really put you in a hole real quick, especially at home. I mean, one of the most worst things I think that could possibly happen is just have a bad flat beginning to a game at home, whether it be during the regular season or during the playoffs. It's something that really you can't have. I would rather, if you were to ask me, where would you if you had to lose a game or have a bad night in the playoffs, I would always probably tell you I would rather have it on the road. I'd rather get blown out on the road than have a bad performance at home. Regardless if it's do or die or if it's game 1, I'd rather, you got to come in with that we can't lose and won't lose on home ice mentality. And that's really what the Lightning need to do in game 2. They really need to go out there, assert their dominance. We saw it at the end of game 1. The Islanders were starting to play a little bit more physical, play past the whistle. So really what the Lightning need to do is cut down on the penalties. There was some ticky-tack things going on in game 1 that can't be helped. But at the same time, you can't have Marty St. Louis taking 2 penalties a game. That's just not something that is going to be beneficial to your team long term. But that, along with just keep the ice in front of Khabibulin empty and let the guy work, and you'll be fine. This is a Tortorella run team, so they're going to go out. They're going to play physical. They're going to play tough, and they're going to play Tortorella hockey, which we are all familiar with. So really excited to going forward with this segment throughout pretty much. It's probably going to take us till the end of the summer with maybe some breaks here and there with possibly some breaking news. We'll see what the present Lightning do as they've signed Moser to a deal today. That only leaves them with about $730,000 in salary cap space. So unless they make some other salary cap freeing deal before the summer's over, which we all know would probably be the more smart thing to do, chances are they're probably done for the time being in making moves. Maybe we'll see something in a couple of weeks. Who knows? With Julian Brebaugh, the man is unpredictable sometimes, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. So, but we'll be running this segment throughout the course of the summer, so stick around and tune in for that. So we'll be back tomorrow to talk about Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Quarterfinal as the Lightning try to go up 2-0 in this series over the Islanders. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.